Hello, everyone. Happy New Year, and welcome to episode 15 of Conversing on Africa's Peace, a podcast focused on African Union's Peace and Security Council and key related issues, produced as a collaboration between the Australian Embassy in Addis and Amani Africa Research and Media Services. So, Sion here once again from Amani Africa. I'm joined by my colleagues Hani and Tefsihit. Hello, both. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, Sion. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. So, as we all know, the PSC, has already adopted its program of work for the month of January. Starting off the year, with quite a bit of interesting agenda items. But before we get into, the details of the program of work for January, why don't we go back and briefly reflect on the Council's engagement during the last month of the previous year, that's December. So any one of you guys want to pick on that?
Thank you, Sion. I think the key session that stood out for many in December was the PSC's very first session dedicated to mercenaries and private military companies. This is the first time the PSC has convened on this matter as a standalone item. And although the outcome document has not been released, we are sure that this is a very timely engagement given the increasing developments of mercenaries and private military companies operating across the continent in various conflicts. And mercenaries are not new, and private military companies are not new to the continent. They have been used since the colonial era, and they've been used to combat African liberation movements and resistance movements from colonial power. But now they've taken on a new form. There's a resurgence of private military companies across the continent, and they've taken on a manner of supporting and sustaining stability for African member states dealing with conflict and insecurities in their countries. This is a result to the growing threat of terrorism and increased confrontations of African states have with insurgent and armed groups. It has created the lack of member states' capacity to combat terrorist organizations on their own, so they have been looking to outsource their capacity via private military companies and mercenaries. And the main case that a lot of people have drawn attention to is the case of Mali and the Wagner Group. Wagner Group's heading up base in Mali just 6 months after the military coup in 2021, and this increasing profile of the Wagner Group is in the context of and triggered by the Russia invasion of Ukraine. There's been since the war in Ukraine, we have seen an increasing coverage of the Wagner Group operating across the continent, including in Sudan and in the Sahel region. However, it's equally important to take note that there are also non-Russian private military companies, security companies, and mercenaries operating in the region. Various countries have capitalized on the increasing instability across the continent to infiltrate the security sector in Africa. And this is kind of just to give you a background on what has been transpiring around private military companies and some things that the PSC might have discussed. In addition, I think we hope the outcome document of the Peace and Security Council goes beyond to incorporate some of the key recommendations that came from Amani Africa, where we propose that the PSC addresses underlying causes of private military companies and the need for security sector reform to bolster the legitimacy and effectiveness of national security infrastructure. That means enhancing the capacity of member states to develop mechanisms and deal with terrorist threats and armed groups. And we, as well as we also hope that the PSC communique establishes a regional framework that provides continental guarantee to the member states when they opt for enlisting support from private military companies in a legitimate and defined circumstance. Because right now, the definition of private military companies is not properly defined in the AU Convention. And we also highlighted in our insight, we also highlighted the need for the PSC to consider the best pathway to ensure the elimination of mercenaries and private military companies in a manner that will not leave countries in fragile conditions more vulnerable. But this includes looking at the value addition that private military companies bring, but also the destructive nature of private military companies and the human rights abuses also associated with that, and identifying alternative means of to supplement the value add that private military companies bring in a way where the state is actually in control. So that's kind of some of our recommendations. I will give it over to Tifsahet for her insights on what has transpired in December.
True.
Tifsa, what did you think was interesting?
Thank you, Hani. Well, in addition to the session on mercenaries, the PSC also had the session on the promotion and protection of the rights and welfare of children in situations of conflict in Africa. It was held at the ministerial level on 4 and 5 December in Gambia. During the session, 3 children from Mozambique, Nigeria, and South Sudan made a statement to the council. These children shared their experiences in conflicts and how to prevent and address violations to the PSC. There were also briefers, including the UN Secretary General's Special Representative for Children and Armed Conflict, and the Director for the Conflict Management Directorate of the AU Commission. Representatives of member organizations of the Net for Peace of the AU were also included during the session. Our founding director, Dr. Salamon Darso, was also present during the meeting, and he gave a briefing during the session. The main purpose of the meeting was to create a platform for PSC members, AU member states, the African Platform on Children Affected by Armed Conflicts, RICS, international partners, CISOs, think tanks, and other stakeholders to share lessons learned and exchange ideas on practical strategies for preventing the violations of children in conflict situations. To share some of the highlights from the outcome document of the session with our listeners. During the session, it was recognized that establishing a culture of child protection requires integrated gender transformative approach into governance, peace and security mechanisms. This includes incorporating gender perspectives into early warning systems, conflict prevention, resolution, peace support operations, and post-conflict reconstructions. In addition, it was highlighted that troop and police contributing countries should enhance training programs for law enforcement, military personnel, and judicial officials. This is to ensure that they are well versed in child protection laws and equipped with best practices for preventing, investigating, as well as protecting crimes against children in conflict situations. In addition to this session, what I would like to add is that informal consultation was also held for countries going through political transition. These countries are Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. And in addition to that session, the PSC also had other activities. One activity was the 3rd annual joint retreat with APRN that was held in Johannesburg, South Africa. And the other activity was the 10th high-level seminar known as the Oran process. It was held in Algeria on 17 and 18 December 2023. Yeah, that's how the months went.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tifsahet and Hani both. That was actually quite a comprehensive review of what took place during December of last year. I think I found it specifically very interesting that the PSC initiated this ministerial level session in Gambia on CAC, and the fact that they're trying to develop now this practice of actually inviting children who are affected by conflict situations, I think is something that needs to be really commended and taken forward. So yeah, but looking ahead, we know that Ghana has already welcomed the year, taking responsibility for chairing the council during this month. So according to the program of work that was adopted by the PSC end of December, there are to be 4 upcoming sessions that are to be convened during this month. But we all know that now there have been some new developments. This is, of course, also following the postponement of the session that was supposed to take place on the 8th of January on Guinea-Bissau. We also know that there was a plan for the PSC to undertake a field mission to Tigray region of Ethiopia, but I believe there have been some developments around that as well. Why don't you guys take on and update us on what the agenda would look like going forward during this month?
Yeah, I think you've already kind of highlighted it. The first session the PSC was supposed to undertake was on Guinea-Bissau and has postponed that. We're hoping that they schedule it into their agenda in the following months. But immediately after, they are having a session on the state of peace and security in Africa. So the first session that they're going to have is on the 23rd of January, which is kind of a bit later in the year and the month, sorry. But yeah, so that's kind of their first session. And this will look at endorsing the report on the activities of the Peace and Security Council on the state of peace and security in Africa. And this is often a discussion about what the annual indicative program will look like for the PSC in the following year, but also a chance for the PSC to go through the previous activities that they've had in 2023. And this deliberation will on the report will be in advance to the mid-year summit, so I think it's in preparation for it to be submitted to the heads of state at the 37th ordinary session. And then I can come in a little bit later on the Tigray mission and the monitoring verification later on after Tigray.
Thanks, Hani. Well, the other session for the month is the consideration of the report of the chairperson of the AU Commission on Multinational Joint Task Force and the extension of forces mandate. It's recalled that during its 1126 session, on 12 December 2022, the PSC extended the task force's mandate for 1 year, starting from 1 February 2023. In addition to renewing the force's mandate, which is set to expire on 30 January 2024, the PSC will also review the overall situation in the Lake Chad Basin region, focusing on trends in terrorism, illicit arms transfer, and the progress of the task force's efforts to weaken Boko Haram. The 1126 session also called for the restructuring of the task force into multidisciplinary force with robust police and civilian components that takes into consideration a comprehensive approach to addressing terrorism. Therefore, what's expected from the session is to follow up on the restructuring of the task force. So maybe, Hani, if you give us a brief on the other session.
Yeah, so I think what you mentioned earlier, Zion, there are some unexpected changes to the schedule, and it looks like the PSC field mission that they had planned for to go to Tigray is postponed, and that's also postponed along with the AU monitoring verification mechanism session that they had towards the end of the month, because they were going to debrief on the field mission. It was going to be on the basis of the field missions, which is very unfortunate considering the recent developments that we've seen around the AU really pushing forth the mandates renewal of the AU monitoring verification mechanism. I think earlier the monitoring verification mechanism was supposed to end in December 2023. However, a meeting in the last few weeks of December by the Joint Committee of the Monitoring Verification Mechanism decided that they would extend it for another year, ending in 2024, December of 2024.
Yeah.
And that also included the approval by the AU chairperson to use approximately $1 million USD from the crisis reserve facilities of the AU Peace Fund.
Yeah.
Which is great. And we thought this is going to be an opportunity for the PSC to really go into
the details of
what's happening in the AU monitoring verification process. And also most recently, the third batch of the team of experts, African experts of the AU monitoring verification mechanism is also dispatched or deployed to Tigray as well. So these are developments that are happening in Tigray. It would have been nice if the PSC also went to see if these are actually being implemented and what the process is like, since it's been a year since they've met on this topic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's true. Interesting. So any other session that we're expecting for the month?
Yes, Zihan, thank you. The other session for the month is the biannual consideration of the half-year report of the chairperson of the EU Commission on elections in Africa. The session is expected to cover the elections conducted during the second half of the year, which means from July to December 2023. Okay. The key elections that may be discussed from the previous years are elections held in the DRC as well as in Central African Republic, since they are both sensitive security country situations. For the elections in the upcoming year, 2024, there will be approximately 18 African countries undergoing election only in 2024.
Yeah.
Of the 18 countries, 9 of them pose a significant challenge for the AU and the Peace and Security Council. These countries could possibly be Senegal, Comoros, South Africa, Mozambique, and South Sudan.
South Sudan, definitely.
However, only a number will be taking place in the first half of the year.
Okay.
The critical elections the PSC will discuss for the first half of the year will most probably be Senegal and South Africa. And in addition to those countries, the other critical ones to watch out for the second half of the year include Mozambique, Chad, Botswana, South Sudan, and Mali, as well as Burkina Faso. So,
interesting. Countries undergoing transition. We'll see how they wrap up if they do.
Yeah.
Countries that are a beacon of democracy.
That's true. That would also be an interesting one. So it looks like 2024 will also be the year of elections. Thank you so much, both for highlighting what has really changed within the framework of the program of work for January. What sessions will be taking place. It will be interesting to look forward to these ones. Once again, this brings us to the end of another episode. We wish Ghana, of course, a very fruitful month as it takes the chairship for this month. And we wish everyone taking part in the work of the PSC a very productive discussions on the important topics that are outlined briefly here today. We are also happy to encourage our listeners, to dig a little bit deeper into the PSC's agenda, as well as the analytic work that we produce. Amani Africa is also very appreciative of the partnership and support that the Australian Embassy here in Addis provides us in the production of our insights on the provisional program of work of the PSC. And we believe that this podcast is also a very useful accompaniment to this work that we do. Before we go and finalize, as usual, we wish the following African states happy National Days of celebration in January. So we have Sudan on the 1st of January and Republic of Cameroon on the 1st of January. So they've both already concluded the celebration. And Let me also once again thank our listeners for joining us for this month's edition of Conversing on Africa's Peace podcast, which is a collaboration between Amani Africa and the Australian Embassy in Addis Ababa. We hope you have a great month and a productive year. We'll be back next month to consider the PSC's agenda for February 2024. Until then, goodbye. We wish you all peace and prosperity.